Dr. Kay McClenny. She is our consultant that's been assigned to this college from the NCII. And she will be our guiding voice for approximately 18 months or so. She's the one who is going to help us through this transformation process. And she brings her expertise to the table because in many cases she's been there, done that. And so she's going to help us make this happen.
Yeah, and I would just point out the agenda on your table. We have the learning objectives of our site visit identified, and that's really where we want the conversation to be navigated around. We're also going to do an assessment at the end of the site visit because we do have multiple site visits and we want to make sure we're getting the most out of these site visits when we have our consultant here with us. So we'll send those out via electronic in the next day or so. So make sure you give us your feedback, and that's one of the reasons why we had you sign in. But without further ado, Dr. McClenny will step up here. She's been giving us great information and insight so far in the earlier sessions.
And
Back
some
more
of
the
you are
same,
pretty
so.
tired of hearing it by now. I suspect you know Watt's from Nashville. Good afternoon, everyone. Is it what questions or concerns or observations did you bring to the room with you that you'd like to try to be sure we address? Students, I'm going to come back to you, so if you have questions about this, let me know. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I think would help me is just give me a vision of what this is going to look like in 3 or 4 years or when it's done. I'm just having a hard time, you know, they say start with the end in mind, but I can't figure out what the end is. Where are we trying to get?
Okay. That's a reasonable question. All right, I'll work on that. Okay. What else?
For me and for the Universal Design for Learning team, we're concerned or just wanting to know how developmental education is fitting into the pathways and that it's not an isolation.
Really important. About, on which I've been spending a lot of time recently. All right, anyone else? Yes.
How the support services fit in to support and make sure that things get done, because we can't just say faculty do everything.
That is correct. It works both ways. All right, students, do you know why you're here?
I'll be honest, I'm usually
Okay. All right. I like that. Thank you very much. We'll try to figure it out. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So we are here to talk about the student experience. So this should be relevant to that. And in particular, the people that are in this room are involved in work and going to be involved in work about how, based on what we know, we've learned, what the data say, and what students tell us, how we can design a student experience that will produce larger numbers of students who complete college, more diverse graduates of our colleges in Maricopa County, and something that has high levels of educational quality and coherence. So we're not interested in having beautifully mapped guided pathways that don't produce quality in the educational experience. So I'm going to go to a different slide presentation here. So just bear with me for a second. I came with 6 of them because I wanted to be driven not by what I was going to talk about, but by what your questions are. So, here we go. So this will enable us to talk about, hopefully, in a way that's somewhat concise, that question you're asking. What are we doing here? What's the end point? What does this one look like? And what I want to say is we're talking about what do Maricopa College people collectively want it to mean to go to college at Paradise Valley College in Maricopa. What need to be the essential features of that experience? And what will the student experience be? I want to emphasize this because that's the perspective I bring. And many of you have that perspective from your 41 years of experience or whatever, but this comes from, what we hear from students in focus group research, what we've learned from students from much of the work that we have done at Paradise Valley and many other community colleges over the last decade and a half at least. And so that leads me to want to share with you a couple of things about how we got where we are. Why did we arrive at this conviction that designing guided pathways for students is a good idea? And so the first thing I want to do is acknowledge that no one started yesterday working on student success and equity. We've been attending to this. You have been identifying yourself as a learning college since 1998. And colleges around the country have been working on the first year experience, or they've been part of Achieving the Dream, or part of Completion by Design. They've been in the league and going to league conferences and all of those things. So this did not start yesterday, but this is the accumulation of what we learned from all of that and what the limits have been of some of the efforts that we have made in the past. There's been a lot of work on developmental education reform. You people know that better than most. And so I go to, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time dwelling here, but there are a set of data questions. I'm a data person, in addition to being a community college and university faculty member in the past. And I think data can be prompts to help us understand why it is we would ask ourselves to do work as transformational as guided pathways tends to be. And so if you know that about 1 out of 5 of your students, I don't know the data for this college, but I know it for a lot of colleges, if 1 out of 5 of your students are in class at Census State and don't ever complete a single college credit, then that's a marker. And we need to wonder about it. Gee, wonder what's going on there. I wonder if that's all about them or if it is something about us and the way we design the early experiences for students.
Can I ask you to clarify that?
Oh, no,
Is that you're saying nationwide? Is that Maricopa?
No, there is no nationwide data on this because most people don't collect the data. They only do it when I force them to. It's just, we pay attention to some things and not to others. But when colleges look at this, it's somewhere between 17 and 20 or 21%.
And so, but I'm trying to figure out the colleges, like when you say they collect it when you want them to, what group are we looking at the data from?
Oh, okay. You're looking at data from, what I'm saying is that Kay McClintock goes there and arm wrestles them and says, you need to look at this. And so that's probably, overall, is probably 500 colleges I've been in over time.
And so the statistics, you're combining those so across the country from
On
different
average.
community colleges.
Yeah.
But do you know?
Yeah, I've
if
seen
they
one
have-
college where their data was 33%, and they almost suffocated when they looked at those data, but it's generally much lower.
Do you know if we have these numbers specifically for Maricopa?
No, I don't know, and I doubt it, but you could find it out, because you know who's there on Census State, and you know who completes. So it's a matter of pulling those data together.
We don't know who completes, right?
Leave it, John.
Yeah, I've been compiling a list of all the different questions up here. Some of these we have answers to. We've been working on it as a council. Others we haven't, so I've been writing those down for Lucy to make sure that we get them channeled through and worked on as a system.
So these second two data questions, they come from my colleagues at the Community College Research Center at Teachers College, Columbia University. And the reason they're up here is because it turns out that these data elements are highly predictive of student progress and completion in community colleges. Highly predictive. So the more students we can get to and through college level courses, entry college level courses in their first year, the more students we can get into courses in their program of study, at least 1 in the first semester and 3 in the first year, the more those students are going to stay with us. They're going to continue to progress, to accumulate program credits, and ultimately to graduate. And this is that third one, getting students connected early to their content. One of the things we've learned in dramatic ways about developmental education is that when we keep students in a developmental education course sequence for a year or 2 or 3, most of them don't get out. and they don't get to the point that we believe we're preparing them for, right? And so we have learned this as hard as we worked, and it has chastened us to think about different models going forward. So this one I always stop and pause on because it's such a strong characteristic of community colleges. We are really good at innovating, especially for a league college, and at creating special projects, special programs, and boutique interventions, and cool stuff, shiny objects. And very often, those special programs produce good results for the small number of fortunate students who happen to get attached to them. But it's not systematic, it's not scaled to serve all the students who could benefit, and we don't ever go back and integrate these discrete programs and activities into a coherent educational process and experience for students. And so, as hard as we've worked and as innovative as we've been, we've reached the limits of where we can get to in terms of college completion and equity using this model. And that's part of what brings us to the guided pathways. This is a design principle from organizational development literature. Every program, every college, every course, every service that we offer is perfectly designed to produce precisely the results we're currently getting. And so the implication of this is not that we're not working hard. We're out there working hard. We're breaking our bones. We're inventing new innovations. It's that we're working with a flawed design. The system isn't working for us or for our students. And this one is from Alcoholics Anonymous. So there you go. This is what we've learned over a decade and a half or more, learning college work, CESI work, achieving the dream work, completion by design work. We know that when you offer too much information and too many choices, people's brains freeze. And they make bad decisions, or they default and don't make decisions at all. And this happens, across the board. It happens when people are buying jelly. It does. And when they're buying, I will tell a story. I was at a college in North Carolina recently where a woman came out to me after a presentation on guided pathways, and she was new at the college. She had a PhD. She was teaching anatomy and physiology. She was from India. And she had just arrived before the semester started to take on her new role, and somebody kindly took her up. She needed to go somewhere and buy some necessities. She needed toothpaste. So someone took her to Walmart and showed her the toothpaste aisles. Go to Walmart.
Yeah.
So there you are. You've got zero whitening, some whitening, a whole lot of whitening, extra whitening, and you've got fluoride and no fluoride, and baking soda. She said, "Hey, I just wanted to brush my teeth." And so, what's the decision tree that gets you to your toothpaste or your cell phone plan or your mutual fund choices, that sort of thing. So there's been a lot of research in the last few years around behavioral economics and decision theory that tells us that we need to figure out how to help students make good decisions, how to help students make informed decisions. They still have choices, but making informed choices to get more readily from where they start to the better and different place where they want to be 2 or 3 or 5 years down the road. So the contrast that I want to make here is the difference between supported exploration and informed decision making as contrasted with aimless wandering. One of the most predominant patterns of student behavior in community colleges is that students wander in the door, they wander around the curriculum, and then they wander out the door. I see you nodding your head. This is our star wanderer. Not me, not anymore. Okay, we're going to hear from you about that. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so what we want to do is to think about, and we've got expert help here. How many of you know, who weren't here earlier, the average number of college level credits earned by a student who graduates from this college with an associate degree? we now have the data for
You want me to
Paradise.
tell you or you want to guess?
Yeah, how many, what do you think?
Ask the question again?
The average number of college level credits earned by a student who completes an associate degree at Paradise Valley.
More
It
than
we're- it
Please
doesn't
use
include
guessing.
developmental, though.
78.
42?
42? If
You
you
have to-
graduated people with an associate degree with 42 credits,
You have
I
to
know a
have
lot of
60 to
people that-
64.
It's a 60
Sorry,
to 64 credit degree.
78.2.
Okay, so the average is 80. This is good news at Paradise Valley because across the district, the average is 85. And where I was yesterday at Phoenix College, the average is 91.75. So it varies by college, but 80 is too many people. It's a 60 to 65 hour degree. And we're talking about students' time, money, opportunity cost, Pell Grant eligibility, financial aid expenditure, and we're talking about parental and taxpayer investments. So, yeah,
I was gonna say, just to follow up on the previous question, we did answer that question, Felicia, on like number of students not earning credit. The question was slightly different because it was looking at over time with students, how many of them achieve successful outcome. And a successful outcome is they either earned an award or certificate, or they transferred to another university, and we used the National Student Clearinghouse. So then it was, of all those students then in our entering cohort, over a period of time, what percentage of those we couldn't find them anywhere? And that was just over, it was like 55% of the students had what we would consider a non-successful outcome.
ouch. So, all right, we hear another piece of data, and our initial reaction is ouch, and then we ask questions, to better understand the data, and then to scratch our heads and say, I wonder if there's something about the way we're designed, the way the student experience is currently designed that is leading us to that kind of data point. It's an exploration, it's an inquiry, it's a what have we learned about what we could do better that would end up changing that outcome. Yeah.
I'm wondering too about both of these, they're interesting. I think we have to get more clarification too from John. You're saying that they don't complete a degree or certificate from the time they entered to then we couldn't find them anymore, that they didn't get a degree or certificate? Is that what you're saying?
Right, so they didn't graduate with a degree or certificate, or we didn't see them transfer anywhere.
Okay.
And
they
they're not
weren't-
still
and they
enrolled.
weren't-
Right, they're
Right.
not still enrolled,
And
but
they
we
were
don't
still
know
enrolled
intent
here,
yet.
right,
We
and
don't
they're-
know if they completed their intention, so we don't know that this is a bad thing.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
Maybe they changed their major and that's why they have 80 some odd credits when they graduated. Maybe they
So
wanted
the
to take
most
some
common
exploratory-
outcome in American higher education is accumulation of credits and debt and no credential. And in the end, that is not a good outcome for students because completion of post-secondary credentials are the ticket to the middle class. So, yes, there are outliers, and we've talked about different kinds of outliers. There are students that we just lose track of, there are outliers, but when we look at data that show us what is the typical student experience, we ask questions about it, and then we still ask ourselves, what is it that we control that can make a difference?
Right, and I'm asking this not in,
You're
to be
asking great
defensive,
questions.
it's hard to have a conversation based on ignorance if we don't know what we're talking
That's
about. So
exactly
that's my intent, just like the 80%, because I don't want to automatically assume that having 80 number average of credits with a degree is a bad thing.
Right.
Because what if I also have a certificate and something, what if I explored and in the future I'm going to pursue a minor?
Yes.
What if it's a result of fine tuning my purpose? What if it's a result that I really learned that art helps me to grow as an individual, and this is something that's going to be a lifelong hobby or passion for me. So I just am hesitant to jump to any conclusions that something's necessarily good or bad without having an understanding of it.
Well, and asking those kinds of questions. I've asked those kinds of questions in a lot of places, and I invite you to do the same thing. And it's good if you do it by program area, so that you can understand, in architecture or in engineering or in nursing or in English, if there are patterns that will help you do this. But what I can say is that even after you sort out all of those outlier situations, what you're going to find is that you have a lot of students wandering around the curriculum. Sometimes they're wandering because they can't get into the classes that they need in order to progress and complete the program that they've chosen. And that means that our course scheduling is out of whack if we're not offering the courses that they need to progress on a consistent basis. So all of the questions are good. Denial isn't. So, yeah.
I would say you brought up a point as well, what are the things that we can control, because we're not always in control when students don't complete their degree.
No, we're not.
They could have family issues, financial issues that we can't fix for them, unfortunately.
No, it's absolutely true. What I will tell you from doing focus groups with students, it's actually coming up here in just a second, so hold that thought, okay? There are things that we just learned from doing this work and realizing our human and institutional limits. And now, pretty much to your point, I'm going to show you James again. I hope you guys aren't afraid of James. I had a grant a while back to do longitudinal focus groups with students, which basically amounted to collecting students at random during registration and bribing them with pizza and you know, like bookstore cards and stuff to meet with us over the course of their first year of college. And so we met with them during registration, and then again during the third week of class, and then again in November, in January, and then April and May. And students who fell off the truck during that time, we tracked them down and did personal interviews. And so this is one example of a student whose story emerged from that process. This is James, and not his real name.
I like to push myself mentally. I like to listen in and learn new things, and I know that's what college is all about. You know, they teach me stuff high school won't, and I'm all about learning new things. I love education, so I have to admit I was nervous too, like any incoming freshman. But you know, it's just you just got to see it as just another day at school. So like, you just adapt to it. I mean, I did. It's easy. It's just a lot of homework. I don't like homework. I mean, school's all right. I like it, but it's just it's not for everybody. And I guess I'm just one of the people that it's not for. Maybe sometime later on in life I'll pick it back up again. But just it is what it is.
So right after that focus group, he dropped out of college. Why? We found it. We tracked him down. We did another interview with him. Why do you think he dropped out?
He's doing poorly.
I'm sorry?
He's doing poorly.
No, he was not. Not family.
What happened in the focus group to make him drop out?
There's a causal relationship that didn't exist. Yeah. He did not, there were two things, and that's one of them. He did not develop a sense of purpose and a goal about why he was there and where he was headed. And so he felt like he was treading water or something. The other one was that he didn't develop meaningful connection at the college. And I can tell you that, if students, especially students who are first generation, come to college and they haven't developed some kind of connection or relationship by about the third week, we're going to lose them. Have you seen that happen? I dropped out of first semester. Okay. So that is with other students, with faculty, with advisors, with the content. There are all kinds of connections that we need to strive to make with students. But that was what he said. And the other thing you need to know is that he took all the responsibility. He didn't blame you. He didn't blame anybody except himself. And the contrast that I bring to that, and I think is important too, is that we ask the question, we say, we don't control everything, but what is there that we could control where we would have fewer Jameses? What is there that we could take responsibility for so that we don't have that experience as often as we do? So, focus groups with students, you can do the test group. From talking to students who show up at community colleges, this is what we learn about what kinds of questions they have when they show up. Did any of you have any of these questions? Okay, I'm seeing 4 out of 5 nods. What about you? These weren't your questions. Did you have others?
Well, I'm doing what
Uh-huh.
my topics pretty much say.
Okay, that's good. All right. So part of our responsibility in that last thing is, who do we know by name who's going to make sure that students get the answers to the questions they come to college with? And how do we design the process so that everybody gets their answers and not some people are lucky enough to get them and others don't? This is what we typically have in the past thrown at students. This is like the toothpaste aisles. And so what we're trying to do is create a choice architecture that helps students make more informed choices about a coherent, educationally coherent experience that can be drawn out of this wealth of intellectual resources in college. So, coming back to choice making, when we have surveyed millions of community college students across the country, what do you suppose they tell us? And you guys can answer this. We'll spoil it. What do you suppose they tell us is the most important service the college offers? Any college whose data I've ever looked at, and it's hundreds of colleges. I'm sorry? Thank you for saying that, and that is the correct answer. Advising and academic planning. Every year for 15 years, national survey, millions of students, most important service is academic planning and advising. And that's also true in every individual college data that I've ever looked at. This is national data, and it stays right around 90, 91, 92%, 93 every year. And so we go back and we say, we understand you're saying that this is important. Why is it important? Why do you say this? And they say, because I need a map. I need to know what I need to do and when I need to do it in order to make my way to achievement of my goal, whether that's transfer or a job or a career, or a job or a career after transfer, whatever that is. And so this is what we know, and yet, let me see. Almost half of community college students say they don't see an advisor before the end of the third week of class. And that's when most of the advising goes on. So if they haven't seen someone go in, it's unlikely they're going to. So the only thing that I want to impress on you here, and it goes to a question you were asking about support services, is that in all of the research that I have done over a decade and a half, the biggest finding that stays with me that has practical use is the gap that exists between all of the cool stuff that community colleges provide, operative word, provide, another operative word, offer. The gap between what we offer and what students actually experience. Because I've got other data here and I'm not going to spend time on it, but 60-some% of your students are assessed as needing developmental education, but about 80% nationally never participate in supplemental instruction, never participate in tutoring, never, how does that work? And so one of the design principles, design tasks for guided pathways is to say, okay, in this course sequence, in this particular program of study, how do we embed appropriate academic supports into the coursework so that we're providing in a way that's inescapable the kind of academic support that students need. Yeah.
Are you going to be working with the high schools? Because that's where it probably should be. There needs to be a handshake there.
Well, there does need to be a handshake. And yes, we do work with high schools, and yes, we need to do that, but first we need to attend to our own backyard. We need to be prepared for the students that show up at our door, because that's the kind of institutions we are. If we're going to call ourselves open access institutions, then we need to design ourselves in ways that meet the needs of open access students. And yes, we need to be working with high schools about the alignment of college readiness.
I think we have some recent data around how many academic advisors we have for our students and what's the national kind of.
Yeah, so the ratio here at PVCC in terms of student to academic advisor is 1,400 to 1. And the district average is approximately between 1,000 and 1,100 to 1. And the national recommendation from NACADA, which is the Association for Academic Advisors at college level, is 300 to 1. So as you're doing the math on that, in terms of 300 to 1, if we want to focus on some of the design principles around academic advising that our chancellor is championing for us to move towards in this movement of transformation of a case management model where we're following up with students and tracking them. Those are things that we're going to have to look at in terms of how advisement looks over this process of transformation, and that I think includes all of us. One of the things that Dr. McQueen had mentioned earlier was going from the notion of thinking about needing more advisors, which we do, to also talking about more advising, and what does that look like in terms of the responsibility of some of our other learning support and even faculty responsibilities in what we do to support students.
Thank you.
Yeah, I heard that yesterday and I was like, amazing.
So let me pick up on that because, you know, we need to live in the real world with regard to resources here. And I've never worked with a college doing guided pathways work where they didn't come to the conclusion that they needed more advising. They needed more capacity for working with students to make choices, to choose and enter a path, and then to stay on the path over the course of that. But so if what we need is more advising, then what are the ways of building that capacity that Tanisha is talking about? One is, and it's common, the colleges choose to add advisors to their staff. It's uncommon for them to add as many advisors as they might think they would like to, just as an affordability question. But we've seen, you know, substantial additions to advisor, and that's usually linked, as it should be, to, yeah, you're going to bring on new people, but you're also going to provide some really systematic, high-quality training for those folks. You're going to think about what kind of certification is appropriate, or whatever. That varies from place to place. But so adding advisors. Another is to repurpose people that in limited resource environments. Then we have to look around at some of those kind of special purpose or special populations or small student population programs that we've done and say, how can we capitalize on and optimize the time and the skills and the value of these people by having them as a part of our advising capacity. So that's number two. Number three is triaging advising, which happens in some places. There's a college, a large college in North Carolina that says we're gonna distribute advising in ways that have people who are really good at certain things doing those certain things. So professional advisors are working on the academic planning and the goal setting and the definition of the pathways. Faculty really understand their programs and the course sequences and the transfer options and what kinds of careers or jobs are available in the Phoenix area. Students, as peer advisors, can be very powerful retention specialists. They help navigate the system. They provide savvy and wisdom about how you make it through this place, basically. And so thinking about who does what best, triage. And the fourth strategy is being thoughtful and strategic about what kinds of conversations require one-on-one individual advising and what kinds of conversations can actually be better done in group advising settings. So if you have students coming in and they're choosing a meta major, and so they're associated with STEM or business or arts and humanities or whatever you end up with as your meta majors, then they're going to be in there with a cohort of other students who are within that same meta major, and you want to do everything you can as faculty and advisors and counselors to build out of that meta major, not something that's just a thing on paper, but that is a large-scale learning community. And so you're going to try to make those students into a cohort. Some of our programs do this really well. Nursing is typically an example. But if you do group advising, you're getting multiplied benefits. Students get to know students, they get to know their advisor. Some students will ask questions, other students won't ask. You know this from teaching. And it creates student engagement and that sense of, we're going to move through this together. And so I don't know where you will end up as a college or as a district on the we need more advising question. But you've got a lot of sort of creative things that you need to think about. And it's possible, in my view, that you're adopting a case management model. That's a good thing. You're moving with students. They get to see the same advisor. You know the students that you're working with. But how you create the right mix of advising can certainly vary from college to college within Maricopa, as it would between your colleges and others around the country. Just ideas to think about. Okay, so I'm reminding myself of some of the things that you said I'd like to know about. So the student experience is, first we've done the work that's going on as we speak in Maricopa of mapping the program course sequences, right? So, and the decision is that across the Maricopa colleges, those program maps will be the same from college to college. Course sequences in a given area of study. The second design decision for program faculty, working with math faculty, is what's the right math for that program. So if I'm a student and I really need to do the algebra calculus pathway in order to progress in STEM, then that's going to be the math. If I'm in health careers, it's more likely to be statistics. If I'm in arts and humanities, it might be quantitative reasoning. That's a faculty discussion. What's the right math? Right being what students actually need in order to do well in that field. After that, then there are discussions we've talked a lot about today, and I won't go into it deeply, but faculty discussions about what kind of recommendations do you want to make, what kind of options do you want to put in front of students about their core curriculum courses. Standard examples, do you think business students ought to take ethics? Do you think health career students would benefit from taking developmental psychology? You can multiply those examples. Again, a faculty conversation. After that, then we start doing some things. I would say that a lot of those conversations too will be held at the district level, because to the extent that program maps need to be the same, then that conversation needs to occur, and there needs to be a clear work schedule that shows when faculty and advisors and others will have an opportunity to review those things, to provide feedback, to vet them, and so on, and we're working on that.
A question about the maps being the same. We kind of talked about this earlier too.
Yeah.
One thing is that I don't think we want to get to a point where every student takes the exact same thing, even if they're in the same meta major. I mean, what's important in our country is that there's diversity. Okay, I went to a liberal arts college. I have philosophy, religion is my background. But maybe someone else went somewhere else. So I think that, we need people who, have different experiences to make our society rich instead of everybody just taking the same thing.
So I think that it's an excellent point, and there's a yes and to that. First of all, and this is, you're prompting me to make a really important point we talked about earlier. That is, what your mapping groups are doing at district is creating default program maps. This is the standard, it's the default. But for every single student, that default map is going to get tailored to that student's circumstances. And the circumstances might be about, I'm a part-time student, or I have a shift that doesn't end until 3 o'clock, or whatever those life circumstances are. But it might also be, I am passionate about piano, or something else, pick anything. And so you're going to tailor that student's educational experience around the default. You're not going to blow up the map. You're not going to create chaos. And the but part of it is that the limits to that for me, from the student perspective, are if I start at Phoenix College and I move to Paradise Valley, you should not have different requirements for me
But we don't.
than I have, right. Well, the way this map is developed, students shouldn't get jerked around by having different expectations at different colleges, because too many of them swirl and enroll in multiple places and that kind of thing. So that's my limit on that business about variation. We just keep thinking about students and their perspectives and their experience. Okay, so let's go to the developmental education question. And I'm actually running a Pathways Institute in a month or so for a group of colleges that are doing this work that is fully about integrating redesigned developmental education into guided pathways. And part of this was, an afterthought that you guys would laugh at, but we've had these, colleges around the country doing mapping like you're doing, and they create these beautiful maps for college level work, and then they look at each other and say, just what you did. So how about the fact that 65% of our students actually aren't fully prepared for college level work, right? And so let's get back to reality. So I'm just going to say in a sort of shorthand way that what we've learned is that what we've learned fundamentally is that if you're doing standalone sequences of pre-collegiate courses, you should stop doing that, because students don't get out of the pre-collegiate course sequence. It becomes a prison of sorts, and it has disproportionately negative impacts on students of color and students from low-income backgrounds and students from deficient high schools. So that's number one. So the question becomes, the standard for design becomes, what are our best strategies for getting much larger numbers of students more quickly into college level English and math first, right? Thus come models that are actually being implemented in your district and are being done at scale in an increasingly large number of colleges. Co-requisite instruction in both math and English, math pathways. What we're seeing in colleges that are doing this is 3 times the success rate in half the time. Now, why wouldn't we do that? If success means getting to the college level course and passing it, not getting through the developmental sequence, right? So that's been a shift in our thinking and our standard based on what we've learned over the last 15 years. So there are different ways to do that. There are data around those different ways, and they're working on it here. I know that that's going on. So the impact of this on your question, what's the experience, is that much larger numbers of students. In most colleges, 60 to 70 to 75% are going to go directly into college level courses with required support of some kind. And designing what that required support looks like is an art form that's informed by evidence, and it gets done differently in different colleges. So it could be an emporium, computer-based thing. It could be supplemental instruction. It could be required time in a math lab or tutoring center. All of those things are legitimate, but it matters how you design the co-requisite support. I'll just give you one example. A college in Southern California, highly Latina population, and they went whole hog, sort of cold turkey, into scaled co-requisite instruction last year, and in 1 year's time they went from having 16% of their students who passed the college level course to 67%. Now, I can't tell you how powerful a predictor that is of what the future of those students is going to look like. And so that's where we're headed. And we're also headed towards to the extent that's possible, contextualizing those experiences within the meta majors, so that once again, students are having, if you're in an engineering meta or a STEM meta major, you're doing your academic skill building using problems that are pertinent to engineering or to health careers, or you get what I'm talking about. Then you have to be concerned, as I know the developmental educators are, about, if that's 70% of your students, what about the other 30%? The very least prepared students. And the good news is, I've been a skeptic about this for a long time, people, and we had this conversation this morning. I've been waiting for the data that says that we're not just shoveling those students out and sitting them on the curb, because that's an equity issue in a lot of places. And so what we're seeing with co-requisite and math pathways is that as we get better and better at it, we are able to go to lower and lower levels of academic preparation and be successful with these students. And there are also special programs, and I heard about at least one in this environment, for intensive and accelerated refreshers that can get the least prepared students readier faster than what we've been doing in the standalone courses. So that's, that's rapid fire, and it's a lot, it's probably not enough. But that is part of the thinking that needs to go into how do we embed academic skill building into the pathways. The other part that's important is to say it's not just college level math and English. What are the other courses that are going to trip up students? You know what they are. Chemistry, anatomy and physiology, intro to accounting, intro to economics. You know what they are. And we know that we want to have high expectations for community college students. We also know that when we have high expectations, it needs to be accompanied by high support. And so thinking what is discipline appropriate, because what's appropriate in chemistry may be less effective in English or in nursing. But what are the discipline appropriate academic supports that we can embed in that pathway so that students get the help they need and don't get overlooked or don't become part of that population that, I know there's a tutoring center, but I'm not going there. Yes?
Okay, I was just going to ask the other colleges that you've worked with, the universities, do they have to reconsider their course competencies?
Yes.
To update, revise, or?
Yeah. Well, I would say revise in the sense of align. What you want through that course sequence is course learning outcomes that accrue to program level outcomes. And so you don't want to teach the same stuff, but you want to make sure that the things that are important to you, the learning outcomes that are important to you, are being taught in the sequence. And that's, if you have a multifunctional team that's sort of overseeing your meta majors at the end. I've been to these meetings at other colleges at the end of the semester where a group of program faculty and advisors will be sitting together kind of reviewing what went on in their meta major that semester, and they'll say, we got this course sequence wrong. It's just backwards. We need to fix that, and we've got to talk with our colleagues at the other colleges about that. Or we have a couple of really important learning outcomes that no one's teaching. It's just a gap in what's going on out there, so we need to make sure we know where that's going to get addressed. Or they will talk about Charlie. I heard this at a college in New York. Charlie isn't doing well here. Used the example earlier. Charlie came into this cohort of students sort of in the role of class clown. And students won't let him out of that. They've got him boxed in, and he now takes his math seriously. And so we've got to do something about helping Charlie adapt better before he just leaves. So those are great educational conversations. And that's the part of this I look forward to for all of you after you get through some of the, kind of hard work of getting these things set up. Yeah.
So if we have, say, a great advising intake system, plenty of advisors, we have outstanding instruction, we have a system in which we check in on these students that are in a major and have declared a meta major or major on a systematic manner.
Yeah.
We're doing all these things, but there's still a certain percent of our students that for whatever reason are not willing to put in the time to be successful in their courses. There's lots of reasons for that, but they're there. And so when we look at our success rates that are not necessarily as high as we want them, those students are in there.
Yeah.
And they're always going to be in there.
They're-
It's just the nature of being a community college. We're $80 a credit hour, and so we get students that come that, they're trying it out, and they're just, but they just don't have the time and energy to do the work. How do we explain those students that are in there?
Pretty much the way you just did, I would suspect. But so let's take that, because it is a reality. We are never going to be perfect. And there are always going to be some life intervening situations for our students. The question is about what we have control over, right? And to keep doing the best we can to design the experience that's going to provide the supports that are going to keep them here. The kinds of experiences you're talking about creating, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the faculty pieces of this in a second, are engaging experiences. They are, I use this term all the time, sticky. They are based on data and what students tell us that give students reasons to stay. And so by the nature of the model, and I'm not making this up, we have data, students are going to persist longer, they're going to accrue more credits, and they're going to complete more frequency, and we're going to narrow the equity gaps. Somebody is going to notice, because I'm an advisor assigned to a meta major, I'm going to be monitoring my students, and I'm going to notice when Charlie is struggling. And I'm going to make sure that, if it's not me, that Charlie gets connected to the support that he needs to stay in. So a lot of this is more about intentionality than anything else. You and I had that conversation earlier. The notion of cohort, the notion of connection, the notion of advisors that case manage students through the process, all of those elements of this are both based on evidence, data, and student voices that say, if we design the experience in this way, we're going to optimize chances, but we're not going to get to 100%. I think I'm being told one more time. I always look at the clock at the beginning and then I fail to look at it again. So we are all too soon out of time. I want to thank you again for your time, your commitment, your questions. Your questions are good. You need to keep asking them. I know you will. We couldn't stop you. And as this work evolves and I'm able to come back and see you again, I hope that we can continue to have the conversations that are going to be useful and productive for you. I want to make good use of your time because I know that it's precious. And thanks to all of you for what you do. Appreciate it.